This is Democracy Watch. So, Mark, we have what looks like a huge backfire coming out of the Trump White House. As you know, the White House instituted a freeze of all federal grants. A lot of chaos ensued after that. There was a lot of pushback to this freeze. Ultimately, the Trump White House had to rescind the freeze. So, okay, bit of a black eye for them, but the issue would finally be behind them. But then, Trump's new press secretary, Carolyn Leavitt, came out onto Twitter and wrote, "This is not a rescission of the federal funding freeze. It is simply a rescission of the OMB memo to end any confusion created by the court's injunction." So she tried to say, no, this definitely wasn't rescinded. We didn't get embarrassed here. Basically to prevent it from looking like they took the L. But then that tweet resulted in a judge coming forward in a lawsuit that was then filed to prevent this freeze of grants from happening. The judge said that because of Carolyn Leavitt's tweet, he would then grant the restraining order, saying the withdrawal of the hugely ambiguous OMB order is only a distinction without a difference based on comments by the president's press secretary. So, to what extent do you think that this was Trump's new press secretary screwing herself and this White House with this idiotic tweet that would ultimately be the very reason that a restraining order against the White House would happen?
All right, so I feel like the person who is laughing out loud right now with like a beer opened in one hand and popcorn in the other is Sean Spicer, right? Sean Spicer is looking back and being like, all I did was mess up about crowd size. Right? Like, sure, I got that wrong and like my suit didn't fit well and all that. But like this press secretary, this was supposed to be the more competent administration. Remember, we were all told that, Trump 2.0, they're all buttoned up. They're all going to hit the ground running. They're going to have tight legal. They're going to have tight EOs. They're going to have tight comms. This is just an utter mess. So as you point out, the president, OMB director or OMB put out this memo saying that they're going to freeze all grants and loans from the federal government. This seemed to catch Republicans and everybody else around the country by surprise. Among other things, it led to the collapse of the Medicaid system, which in all 50 states, those websites went down. And a lawsuit was filed immediately by a great outfit called Democracy Forward. That went to a federal judge in Washington, D.C. yesterday. It blocked that from taking effect while the case was being heard. The White House, seeing the handwriting on the wall, then said, okay, we're going to withdraw this OMB guidance. We're going to just like take the L on this and like be done. But then the press secretary, fresh off of, I guess, yesterday, she was lying about condoms in Gaza.
Yeah, saying that part of this freeze was to prevent $50 million worth of condoms from being allocated to Gaza.
Right. Okay. So
completely
she's doing
baseless.
A
No evidence that
no, and they walked that. I think they partially walked that back. Like she's doing a bang up job. Like I said, Sean Spicer, literally, if this was a beer, is like, I'll have another.
Yeah.
And so today she, she's getting beat up because they walked all this back. And she's like, no, we didn't walk back anything. We actually still mean the thing that we said, even though the memo was withdrawn. And so in another case that it was scheduled to be heard, the government lawyers came in and were like, okay, nothing for you to do here, Your Honor, because the memo has been withdrawn. And the judge is like, okay, but what about this tweet? And the lawyer's like, I'm sorry, the what? Yeah, I got this tweet. Oh, yeah, don't pay attention to that. And then it's just like, look, I mean, if that's what the president's spokesperson is saying, I'm going to assume it is the position of the president that this is still in effect. So as you say, she created another court freezing this, blocking this, and a big PR headache for the White House.
Now, Mark, there was already one temporary restraining order that was put in effect previously, and now we have a second temporary restraining order that's going to be granted by Judge McConnell here, who we're talking about right now. So don't they do the same thing? What's the point of multiple kind of overlapping restraining orders on this freeze of federal funds?
So again, this is where this was an unforced error by the White House press secretary, because in fact, what you just said was essentially the argument that the government lawyers were coming to say, which is like, look, Your Honor, there's nothing for you to do here. This was blocked and rescinded. And the plaintiffs' lawyers, the lawyers for the group plaintiffs in the second case, were like, Well, but that's not what the White House is saying. I mean, the White House is saying everything is still in effect. So there must be something left to block. And the judge is like, okay, well, I mean, if that's what the president's spokesperson thinks, then yeah, I'm going to have to block it. And so this is entirely a mess of Donald Trump's White House's own creation from start to finish. From the issuance of this OMB memo, which was nonsense and an unforced error, to the rescission of it, to the tweet about it. I mean, everything about this was amateur hour. If it was not so deadly serious for the American public, you would just think this was a put up to laugh about. It is very reminiscent of the crowd size debacle that the White House started with, 8 years ago.
Right. Mark, we're looking at a scenario here where there were folks in all 50 states across the country who were blocked out of the Medicaid portal. I mean, this is very much life or death for people across the entire country. Do you think then that by virtue of the Trump administration having to walk this back, and by the way, this is an administration that doesn't often admit fault. It is in their DNA. I mean, this is what we're talking about right here is a testament to the fact that they never want to admit fault. It's very much the Roy Cohn school of management here. But the fact that they did have to walk back this grant freeze applying to Medicaid at the very least, does that show that they are indeed susceptible to some political gravity here?
I think that they're susceptible to losing in court. I mean, you cannot disconnect, I don't believe, what's happened here to what happened in the birthright citizenship case, right? Remember, the birthright citizenship executive order comes first, and that goes to court first. And a Republican appointee basically says to the lawyers, did you not go to law school? Essentially, this is wildly unconstitutional.
Is that not something you generally want to hear when you filed a lawsuit?
Right. And so, the judge says, I am blocking that.
Yeah.
I'm issuing a temporary restraining order there. Now you come up with this OMB order. And it was less dramatic, less theatrical in the courtroom. The judge in D.C. was much more restrained. But the vibe, from what I understand from lawyers there, was sort of the same, which was the D.C. judge was like, OMB can't do that. Like Congress appropriated funds, like the White House can't just shut this down.
Yeah.
So they get that blocked. So now it is against that backdrop, and the fact that you have Republican governors even worried about the Medicaid, the distribution of funds. The fact that you have Meals on Wheels saying that they may be unable to do their work. That you have a White House that, as you said, felt the need to walk this back because they were going to get absolutely obliterated in court when this case was heard next Monday on the merits. And they wanted to avoid that. And if they had just left it there, they would have taken the loss. It would have been, as you say, it's not a White House that likes to take losses, but they would have taken it and they would have moved on. Instead, their White House press secretary decided to try to play cute.
Yeah.
And try to act like they didn't take the loss. And that only incited another court hearing in which another set of government lawyers had to walk in and try to defend the absolute indefensible. And again, now are going to lose. And, this sort of is building on itself. One of the things that the government has an advantage in all these cases is the credibility of the United States government, right? When they stand up, they say, I'm here on behalf of the United States. And I think judges are now getting a sense that this is just a White House that actually didn't lawyer any of this stuff, that none of this stuff was thought through, that there wasn't actually a legal plan to do this. This was just bluster on the part of on behalf of an authoritarian president that hadn't thought through any of this.
But Mark, we're seeing a lot of kind of analogous behavior between what you had contended with a lot of the pre-election litigation that was being put forward by the RNC and a lot of these voter suppression groups, where there wasn't a basis for most of these cases anyway. They just wanted to throw as much shit against the wall as they possibly could, hoping that even if one of these illegal things would stick, that would be a win. And so it looks like, I mean, would you agree that this looks very much the same as that strategy of, look, none of this is constitutional, none of this is legal, but if they can score a win with any of this stuff, that's just gravy?
Oh, I think that's absolutely right. I think that is their strategy. I think that where the unforced error of today comes in is that for that strategy to work, what they need to do, and what usually, for example, in the voting cases they did, is if they had 10 voting cases and they lost 9 of them and they won part of 1, they ignored the 9 and highlighted the part of 1.
Yeah.
And what the press secretary did here was highlight the 9 and say we didn't really lose them, right? And that's the reason why this was an unforced error. The reason why it was an unforced error is because, like, literally they could have just gone about their business and been like, yeah, we rescinded this because some left-wing judge in Washington, D.C., issued an order and we're going to appeal. And like, that would be like the holding statement of the administration. Instead, they acted like the spokeswoman for the president acted like they didn't lose and therefore baited another set of plaintiffs with another federal judge to then reiterate that they have lost. And, that is why I equate it to Sean Spicer and the crowd size, because like literally, if you are just sworn as president of the United States, who cares how many people were standing out in the audience?
Yeah.
If you are the press secretary for the new president of the United States, why are you fighting with the press corps that you had more people than Barack Obama when in fact you didn't have more people than Barack Obama? Hi, Sean Spicer. I have not forgotten that you dressed up in a bunny suit.
Well, this goes to show what happens when you have an administration that is driven solely by ego. And they should have learned it with Sean Spicer, but they're clearly not learning their lesson, that it doesn't ultimately redound to any of their benefit to do that.
No, but I don't think Donald Trump cares. Like,
Correct.
This is the thing. Like, I think Donald Trump was fine with Sean Spicer being humiliated. Like, in some ways, I think he actually took a certain amount of pleasure in the fact that Sean Spicer was humiliated.
Yeah.
And he doesn't care anymore about this new press secretary being like, Sean Spicer was a disposable feature to him.
Right.
And that's the thing is Donald Trump doesn't care that the other people are humiliated.
Right.
He doesn't want himself to be embarrassed. So in his view, I'm sure he's like, look, this was a win for me because I was being defended. My staff was out there defending me, even though in the end they lose in court, even though in the end she loses credibility. I'm sure that he thought that her saying whatever she did about condoms in Gaza was like a big victory. Right. So this is the thing that people around Donald Trump don't understand is he thrives off of the humiliation of other people. There's no loyalty that runs both ways.
Right. And it goes from Kayleigh McEnany, who he's publicly shamed, George Papadopoulos, Gordon Sondland, his longtime EU advisor, Michael Cohen, Ronna McDaniel. I mean, the list is endless. And the only thing
At one point, Steve Bannon. The only thing more pathetic than these people lining up to eventually be humiliated is the fact that for some reason, each one of these new folks who comes along thinks that they're somehow special and that they won't be the next person to be discarded. And I think what nobody's learning here is that none of you are special. You will all be discarded the moment you become politically inconvenient for Donald Trump, and you will get thrown under the bus in the exact same way that he's thrown everybody who came before him under the bus, because Donald Trump's loyalty goes one way. It is a one-way street. It is transactional. He expects loyalty, and in return, he offers nothing. So with that said, look, I know that in large part we are now in this post-truth era. Donald Trump's new press secretary, Carolyn Leavitt, is putting that on full display, which underscores the need for accurate information on a daily basis. It's never been more important. So for folks who are watching right now, if you want to get that, please make sure to sign up for Democracy Docket. It's the news outlet Mark founded to focus on everything voting elections. Again, has never been more important than it is right now. So I'll put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen. I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.